Rock and roll.
All right. My name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Scotty and Jennifer Henry. We're at Seasoned Cellars in Roseburg. It's June 24th, 2022. Thank you both so much for joining us today. First question for either of you is why wine?
Yeah. Why not? Well, it's
in our blood.
Yeah, it's something that I think we're not the only ones. It's a subject and a lifelong, what ends up being a lifelong adventure, learning, experiencing thing. And I think once a lot of people get a little taste of it, a lot are drawn into the wine industry, whether they're retail or restaurant or sommelier or actually involved with wine production or wine sales through wholesale and whatever. Running across so many people over the years out there that they were doing something else, or they somehow got interested in wine, being maybe just even a waiter or a waitress for a restaurant, and it just piqued their interest. And as they got into it farther, it just became, it's like, well, I want to be in the wine industry. So my background, I guess, is a little bit different. I more or less grew up in the wine industry or around it since I was actually a little kid. My father, that founded Henry Estate Winery in 1978, was an engineer down in Sacramento in the 60s. He was an aerospace engineer in Sacramento for Aerojet General, working on some of the early, NASA projects, Apollo, various different things. I don't want to get into that too much, but while he was there at Aerojet, he became friends, very close friends, and teamed up with a couple of other engineers down there, Norm DeLuz and Gino Zapponi. And they went on in the late 60s to form ZD Winery, which is probably, if not, it should be fairly well known to most winophiles that are familiar with Pacific, at least California and Pacific Coast wine production. So Gino Zapponi and my dad were actually best friends, and many fly fishing trips on the American River up east of Sacramento, and they took me on some. I remember as a kid, on their fishing trips, eating pan-fried rainbow trout for breakfast, lunch, and dinner while we were camping up there. It's where I learned to first really love fish and how to bone out a cornmeal cast iron fried, fish. But anyway, so Dad that's where he became like kind of fascinated. I was much too young, obviously. I was like about 6 or 7 or so there in the late 60s. And ZD used to be in Sonoma at that time. It wasn't in Napa. Right now it's on the Silverado Trail now. So he took me with them a couple of times, or more than once, to the original ZD winery there. And I remember the big press, like it was like a big giant, like an apple press or something with this. It was, I'm reaching way back because this was, over 50 years ago, that I'm trying to pull this up. But so I remember them being around and working on wines and stuff from a very young age. I'm actually guilty of breaking my first hydrometer at the age of 6. They were doing their thing, and I was over fussing around by the little table where they had some of their lab equipment, and I distinctly remember either Dad or Gino telling me not to put that thing down and don't mess with it. And within a few minutes later, I picked it up and dropped and broke their hydrometer. I remember, getting scolded, and so that's one of my very earliest recollections of the wine industry. So, and then we moved from Sacramento in 1972, and that's when my father Scott planted the first of the Henry Estate Vineyard in April of '72. I was part of the planting crew, just helping water. I was 9 years old at the time, so I was, on the farm. Even the younger ones, are helping out and doing what they can. So I remember the first planting of the vineyard in 72, and then Henry Estate formed in 78. I was like a freshman in high school, sophomore or something like that. So still not drinking age or whatever, but I helped wash barrels. I did whatever during harvest time, crush and stuff like that to kind of help at the time. So my catching that wine bug started at a very young age. I'd been around it for I'd seen different wine. I'd been around a lot of wineries by the time I was even turning 21 or whatever. So I don't approach it from having been an adult and drank wines and, I love this, I want to get in the industry. I grew up from an age where, I loved the grape juice that they were making before they were fermented in wine. I couldn't understand this fascination with the wine itself. They were oohing and ahhing over the Henry Estate 78 Pinot and how wonderful it was. And I mean, I was, as in high school, they'd I'd have as much as they had no problem with, raised on a farm or a ranch. It's not that trying to get me drunk. It's like, hey, check this out, pay attention. And I was like, dude, man, I couldn't understand what the whole, big hullabaloo was all about or whatever until I was a little bit older. And, probably my sophomore year or whatever at Oregon State, and I'd go back up to school with a case of the Red Table wine, and I wasn't much of a cook, but I could make spaghetti, and and belong about 19 or 20, and it's like, this red wine and the spaghetti go pretty good together, and then it was more of a exponential, type curve into the wine, Then at that point, not only had I been around wineries since I was really little and seen the process of commercial wine production from the beginning, but I actually I like this. This is really good, I'd like what it was that was coming out the other end, and so that kind of definitely, that'll set the hook in your cheek and reel the fish in the boat for sure. So that's kind of why wine for me. Do you want to say a little bit about why wine for you?
Sure. I kind of grew up with it somewhat too. My parents were farmers in Kansas, and then in '77 they moved us out to Oregon, and so we moved to the Philomath area. And my father ended up buying some backhoe and cat equipment and did house dig-outs and septic systems, and I helped him with that for a while. But deep in his heart, he was always a farmer. And so they purchased some property out by Kings Valley area, and split it up into some lots and sold a lot to Glenn Longshore with Serendipity. And he proceeded to plant vineyard and start a winery up there. And my parents we were doing Christmas trees at the time on that property. And we became friends with Glenn and Cheryl, and we'd go up and help them with crush and stuff like that. And so that's kind of where I got hooked. I was still young. I wasn't really into drinking much, but it was accepted, that I could try it by my parents. And then in '83, we planted our first 20 acres of vineyard, Airlie Winery. Dunforest Vineyard is what we called it. Named the winery Airlie Winery because it's out there by the old town site of Airlie. And that was when I was a senior in high school. And then I went off to college, went to Oregon State, started out in engineering, knew that wasn't what I wanted to do, and then then got diverted and moved to California for a little bit, and came back in '89 and started helping my parents. They had started the winery in '86. And so, and I'd come back in, at times and helped them with that. And then from '89 until they sold it in '97 to Mary Olson, I was a major hand in the vineyard. I did marketing.
You did everything.
I did everything. It was just my parents and I that made all the wine. We did it all, and we were up to 10,000 cases by the time we sold it in '97. And so anyway, I had met Scott in '94 in the meantime, doing festivals and stuff, and who I really fell in love with was...
What? It was before 94.
Yeah.
It was like...
Yeah, '94 I moved back here. So from '89 to '90 till I moved down here.
We met in '91 and
right, and
started dating in '92.
Right, keep me correct on this. All right, okay. Anyway, basically it was his grandpa, Cal, that I fell in love with initially. So I'd go visit him at festivals.
At the table at the Henry Estate booth at the wine
when I got
festivals.
a break. And so anyway, then we kind of hit it off in '91, and we've been together since. But anyway,
since early '92, spring of '92.
Yeah. So anyway,
got married in June of '95.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, then my parents sold in '97, and I went out and did some work at the Henry Estates winery then too, and helped out there until basically we started Seasoned Cellars in 2012. So
we're 10 years old.
Yeah. So.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Celebrating our 10th anniversary this year as our own winery.
So,
awesome.
Yeah. So, kind of deep roots in the wine industry. It's a lifestyle. I think we enjoy life. We like good things. We have a rich life. We're not getting rich by any means, but I think rich life makes up for it because it's all about good flavors, and we've made so many friends in the industry that it's. I don't think I know I don't really want to do anything else in my life, than be in the industry. So anyway, and we like to drink good wine, so we couldn't afford our habit.
That was one of the motivating reasons for being and justifying or rationalizing our insane desire to start our own winery was I looked at her and said, I've got such a high level of expectation of wine that if I wasn't making it myself to my standards, I was going to have a really high-paying job to afford the quality of wine and the amount of it that I consume. I mean, I'd have to be making, a really shiny figure just to budget for my wine habit. So we thought, well, maybe we can, make the wine that we want, so it'll save me having to spend $50,000 a year on wine or whatever, tens of thousands anyway, or whatever, on just wine alone. And then, produce it ourselves, and then, we'll sell some along the way and make a business out of it, hopefully. So, but yeah, we both come from way back. Yeah, you took a detour. I took a detour for a while, actually, in a previous career before I came to work full-time at Henry Estate, because I went to Oregon State in the early mid-'80s. I graduated in '86. I was a flight instructor and we did charter pilot work. FBO I flew for we had contracts with the Forest Service and the Fish and Game, with some government contracts that we would that use the aircraft in a commercial, operations and stuff like that, and did that through 1987, and then that's when I went to work full time at Henry Estate in '87, and ended up kind of switching careers. So I missed not being my attempt was to be a airline pilot, and fly jets is what all pilots want to do, is fly jets, so. But I took that detour in 87, September of 87, and then I think by 88, I became a board member for the State Oregon Wine Growers Association, State OWA, representing the Umpqua Valley as a employee of Henry Estate. And so then I was on a 4-year stint on the board, and then after that I served 2 terms on the Oregon Wine Advisory Board, and by that time it drew me in. I was doing sales for the winery. I was getting more and more of my hands deeper into the winemaking for Henry Estate, and then was representing the industry and the winery at various state level boards and advisory committees, and that tended to cement me more in the wine industry, because it's like, if I wanted to do an about face and go pursue my aviation career, then I would have had to leave the boards early before my appointed time, or which is possible or whatever, but it became a harder and harder thing to look away from the wine industry, and my whatever my role was going to be, in that industry, as an industry as a whole, and here in the Umpqua Valley, and for my dad's winery that I was working for at the time, and whatever. So by the early 90s, when we met in 91 and started dating in 92, I was fairly, it was pretty written in stone, the direction kind of I was taking, and moving toward. And so did a lot of sales for the winery when I was still single, and then we got married. Calvin was born in 96, and so that traveling to the East Coast for a couple of weeks and doing sales out there, which used to be, very exciting and kind of fun for a single guy, when you had a family, that wasn't working so well anymore. I was homesick the day after I left. I was homesick to be back with them, and it's all about fun. It's work, and we're trying to accomplish something, but you want to have fun along the way, and that's, I think, a lot of what the wine industry is about, is that we're doing something that we enjoy so much that it's like, when we're working, it's like we're not working really. We're playing, and that's the way it was in the aviation industry too. They paid me. All I wanted to do was fly. And when you're a commercial pilot, they pay you to fly other people's airplanes, right? And I got paid to play. I mean, I got paid to, it's like being a professional, athlete or something. You get paid to play this game or this thing that it was so entertaining for you anyway. It didn't feel like it was work. And it's like, hey, if I can get paid doing this, like, wow, if I can make a living at all doing this, like working but not working, what I mean, then that's, I think, the best thing you can do, or one of the best things you can do for what are the words I want to say, just your general well-being of your life, or whatever. I know a lot of people are probably caught up in, they're making good money, but they're doing a job that they don't really let, there's a grind and a gruel to, having to do that. That all goes away when you're doing something that you enjoy anyway. So, by the early 90s, I was fairly entrenched in the whole thing, and then wanting to stay home or closer to home instead of doing sales, and I thought I'd be better served, because I was starting to be more and more involved with the actual direction that the winemaking was going to. I wasn't a winemaker, my dad still was, I guess, kind of, we were between, but I saw this was more the direction that I needed to, I thought, go, because I have a degree in atmospheric science from Oregon State, so all the physics and chemistry and thermodynamics and I've had all that. I didn't study fermentation science, but I was around, like I said, wineries since I was a little kid, and my family's winery. So it became kind of a natural thing for me to want to move off the road for Henry Estate and into the cellar and apply my science degree into the winemaking end of things. So I took over winemaking there, probably all the reins of the whole operation, probably 1995. Halfway by 94, and by 95, I was commanding all winemaking at the winery there. And we had a few employees, but he didn't have any other winemaker type, so it wasn't anybody that had that background that could do that. And I had the science degree anyway. Like I said, it wasn't a fermentation science degree, but it was still hard. It was a hard science degree, And so I just see that winemaking is just kind of an adaptation of that or something. I didn't have, all through my atmospheric science coursework, the only thing I was lacking was any microbiology. The only micro I had was the stuff that you got in the regular biology classes. We'd touch on microbiology, but I didn't. Jennifer actually for a while was an RN. She went to school, and at the time she was studying at Umpqua Community to get her RN degree, and she was going through the micro classes. I was, had been winemaker there for a long time, so I was just fascinated in talking with her and learning just on the side, more and more micro. And I attended some short courses at Oregon State back in the 90s, I think 97, 98. We did day-long courses on basic wine microbiology, where various different speakers, it's a symposium, and there are little mini seminars every hour on various different subjects, and then we'd regroup the next day and do a whole day-long seminar on managing yeast fermentations, which was, applying some of the wine microbiology. And so I went and picked up some of the little pieces that I was missing a little bit to have a better grasp on, on winemaking.
And it's evolved a lot throughout the years on our techniques. Back in when our families first started making wine, there wasn't much competition out there. And you can't just have mediocre wine now and make it as winery. So it's, and the Oregon wine industry, just the college and everything, all the research and the education that, to make the whole industry here in Oregon better so that it's good for all of us, So it's a win-win, just all the education opportunities out there.
Well, it's been amazing. Just in my 30 years of kind of paying attention to the winemaking, back in the early mid-90s, nobody heard of Brettanomyces, or we didn't talk about nitrogen or yeast available nitrogen in the grape must that are necessary for prospering healthy ferments. And DAP was available, but the Scott Labs I'm sure was around, but the volume of microbiological tools and aids that you have, like yeast nutrient and all of this, I wasn't any of that stuff. It was and I've always been actually fascinated with this industry in the level of approach and the detail to technical science. I'm sure, when the cherry growers get together or the hazelnut growers get together, they've got, obviously it's a crop science and there's things involved or whatever, but like if you've ever been around the ASCV, the American Society of Enology and Viticulture, you go to, like, it's been years, but they hold the big seminar symposium down in Sacramento or whatever, and there's the trade show with all the equipment and all the stuff. But even the Oregon wine symposium or whatever, and then but when the ASCV unloads, it's like, there's like, they're doing graduate work on this stuff. They're getting the PhDs, and these guys are, and you're looking at like, anthocyanin content on Australian Cabernet Sauvignon, vineyards that were leaf plucked on the afternoon side, but not on the morning. And then they're doing these trials, and we're doing sensory. And I don't think there's any other agricultural industry that is so like bent on like achieving the perfect, and just all the variables involved when you go from like grape maturity and grape composition to wine quality, I mean, and it's a vast universe just between those two. And I'm just totally amazed at like the scientific approach to how this happens. So, like the cherry, the cherries, they harvest them to eat. They maybe make some cherry pie. When the apple growers have a heavy crop that year, they're just going, hey, we're making more or whatever. And we got an industry here where, depending on the site situation or whatever, the grower would actually would go out in the field and drop a third of the crop on the ground at a strategic time so that the rest of the crop gets perfectly ripe. Does strawberry growers do this? I mean, does the alfalfa growers do this? I mean, nobody does this. This is like, it's crazy to think about, like the apple, they're just getting more apples, but they're just eating them and making apple juice. And now they're making cider. So, and I've actually got being more piqued with interest on this whole cider thing. I've come across some that I really like a lot, and my wheels are turning, and there's different varietals of apples that do different things, and just watching a video of the cider master at Two Towns and the cider press they had, and they were pressing this kind of apple, and he's down at the bottom when the juice is coming off, tasting it and talking about the qualities, and it made me think about like how that relates to us when the grapes come in, because there's grape and then there's grape and then there's grape, and most average people would, when they came, they wouldn't know. If I had some mediocre Viognier or Miller Turgau from one grower in one bin, and they probably wouldn't know much of the difference, but, as soon as, straight away, just by looking at the fruit, or, we're out in the vineyards that we buy from before the grapes, right at harvest time, and they're coming in, we're assessing quality, obviously, and then when we start to press off and produce the juice. I'm talking about white wine because we get the juice, and we fairly quickly, once I do a little bit of sensory and I run a few numbers in the lab and stuff, we got a pretty good idea. Like, yeah, we got this is going to be really good. So, and depending on how grape is grown, it's like that with everything. There's coffee, and then there's coffee, and then there's coffee. Some people call Folgers coffee, I don't get it, but it doesn't work for me. But and we have to decide at what level is okay for us, so that there's no need to spend that dollar for something really that you're not going to be able to appreciate the level of it or whatever. But that grape composition, that entire starting process of the quality of the fruit, and then from that point, if we do our job and don't get in the way too much and don't screw it up, because you can take awesome grapes and make really crappy wine out of it, but Jennifer's heard this a million times, and I'll tell customers I can't take chuck and make ribeye dinners out of it. You can't do it. It's not there. You can put lipstick on a pig and kind of call it whatever you want, but the real deal is when you get your nose into the glass, and then you start to try it and just see what it is that you're looking with. So yeah, I've just been fascinated with this push over I'm kind of just expanding on you talking about that. We know so much more. We just keep learning more and more and more about, the entire, as an industry, we've come so far. And I think any honest or humble winemaker would admit that even with like maybe 30 years of winemaking behind them, I don't know everything, and there's still much to learn, about this, as we go along. And the way we do it is by making wine. So, I have a laboratory over there where I run chemical tests, but the real lab is back here, is in the cellar, because every time we run a ferment, I've done thousands of them literally, no two have ever come out the same way twice. It never happens exactly the same way twice. So it's a very seat of the pants kind of thing. And yeah, I think just understanding more and more of it, it's been a lot of fun to, and like I said, I'm just totally fascinated when people get their PhDs doing a whole graduate thesis project on some wine, really technical, whatever, I could blah, blah, blah going on. It's, and you go to these symposiums and you see these presentations of it, and it's just, some of it, like, because we went that one year in 92 to the Cool Climate Symposium in Mainz, France, so it was a big, it was like ASCV, like on steroids, because they came from all over the world and it was designed for cool climate viticulture and enology. So Californians were like, you guys can come, but it's not what we're talking about. We're talking cool climate, because that's what Oregon's always been battling for all these decades, from, the very time back when the story I heard about David Lett and actually Rich Summer here at Hillcrest, when they went to Davis down there and they were flat told in the 60s that wine grapes could not be grown in Oregon. I mean, it was part of what they learned at Davis down there, and like, well, obviously that wasn't correct. I mean, we know that to be absolutely false and stuff. So there at the ASCV, they'd be, all kinds of presentations of different, various technical aspects on cool climate, with a specific emphasis on cool climate grape growing and enology and winemaking and stuff. And so that's pretty fun to be able to kind of learn as much as you can. But you're always like, okay, this is great. I'm reading this paper, this 14-page, paper on some technical thing of winemaking, and what you've got to do as the practical winemaker is figure out, like, okay, well, what parts of this can help me make better wine tomorrow? Because a lot of it's like, that's the difference between, theoretical and a lot of what the university work would be doing, and then, and it's not just particular to winemaking or grape growing. It's like this in so many different areas, right? The real practicality or the practical approach, out in the commercial world is often very different. It's usually quite a bit different than, what happens at the university, in a pure, academic world where, of course they have resources for equipment and all kinds of crap that, like, we're not gonna, I don't have a MSGC on board to, do this, microanalysis and stuff like that. So we're always trying to learn, figure out what's practical, what am I learning now that can help me, make better wine tomorrow or whatever. And I've always been
and new issues keep coming up, like the smoke taint, water issues down. Some of our growers, we get grapes down in the Rogue, so just lack of water, because they need to irrigate some of those vines, so anyway, we're constantly learning, and then Mother Nature delves us different, every year's different, so I think that's what keeps us hooked,
Absolutely. Scotty, tell me about, you mentioned your intention wasn't necessarily to go back and work for the family business, but you found yourself back there pretty quickly and were kind of hooked quickly. So tell me about working for the family business, going back and working for your dad, and so the progression through of your role and your work at Henry Estate.
Well, like what I mentioned, the vineyard was planted in 72, the winery was founded in 78, first production happened there, and then I was at Oregon State from off and on. It took a year off, and it took me, I switched majors, so it ended up taking me another year to finish my degree. So I was up in Corvallis most of 80 through, ended up graduating in 86. I took 81, 82 off, and then was full-time back at OSU from 82 through 86. And I would, as a college student, so like on break, Christmas break and spring break, the first year you're in the dorm, and I guess you had a house up there, but or a place off campus you were renting with some, basically, school was shut down for a break or even over the summer, and I didn't have a stable home, or you end up going home because, like, you know, they're closed down the school and they're like, everybody go home, you know, for a week, spring break, or 2 weeks for Christmas break, you know. So I'd be home, and, you know, and actually during, like, harvest time in October, September and October, I remember going home on weekends to kind of help out, you know, with grape harvest, be there. I'd just, you know, be the one picking the buckets. We had square boxes and dumping them in the bins in the truck. And, you know, I didn't have a lead role of any kind. I was just, you know, helping out. So, you know, I did that a lot through, you know, the early part of the 80s. And so I remember some of those earlier vintage, 82, 83, 84. This is interesting, this spring that we've had and all this rain. I've been warning people. I think it was the summer 82 down here in Umpqua and Roseburg. We didn't have more than a 5-day stretch without rain all through the summer. It did this all July, August. I mean, it's like, oh, summer's here. We'd have about 4 or 5 days, and it would have come in, and we'd have a cold front come through, and it would literally rain, you know, in July and August. And it just, and I think 83 was a pretty wet year. And then I remember in 84, I don't remember what the summer was like, but I remember we picked every day in the rain. 84 was a disastrous vintage for the Willamette Valley, I know. Nobody can get any. It's just unripe, you know, rotten, you know, lots of bunch rot, mildew all over the place. It was bad news. So I remember some of those, you know, earlier vintages, and those, you know, being there and kind of learning and helping out, and you know, helping in that limited capacity, you know. And then, as I mentioned, in 87, I took a detour from my flying career. I still wonder, every time a plane flies over, I haven't been current in about, like, at least 12 years. I want to go get my third-class medical and go see the local flight instructor and take a hop and be able to go up in the Skyhawk and just go buzz around again, because they had like 2,200 hours of logged flight time. Bulk of that was instruction given as a flight instructor. I do miss it a lot, but there was a change in 87, and there was an opportunity out there at Henry Estate for more steady pay. That was the problem being a flight instructor back in the mid 80s, and you got paid when you flew, but when you didn't fly, they didn't pay you. You know, it was only, so there would be days I'd hang out in the airport for 8 or 10 hours, and I'd get 2 hours of pay. I'd make like maybe $30 or something, you know, and the whole day's work, you know, out there, and I'd help out with other things around the FBO just because you were there and you need something to do. But it unless I'd moved on to like the commuter airline industry, and then which was my goal to do. And to do that, I would have had to move really to Phoenix or Dallas or some fair weather flying, you know, states where they fly year round, and continue instruction to move on kind of up that ladder, up that aviation ladder. So opportunity came, steady pay, you know, and work. My parents didn't do really the festivals, you know. Henry State did festivals, but they were busy, you know, Dad was busy for sure. And so, you know, like my grandparents would be the ones that would do the wine festivals a lot, you know, just helping out. And they were getting a little older, so, and then cousin Jerry, remember Jerry, right? And who lived up in the Portland area, and so, like, whenever there were festivals or whatever, or other activities where we were pouring in Portland, you know, then and those were kind of fun. So, like, you know, me and my grandparents and my cousin Jerry would be the festival crew, you know, at the Newport or Astoria Festival or whatever back then. And again, that kind of connects back to how she found me, because she'd come over and flirt with my granddad, and then I'd be out and around or whatever, and I'd come back, and, you know, here's this cute thing, you know, like holding court over there with my granddad and everything, and then with grandma, you know, like, you know, I don't think she was like, but that's when
grandma was sweet too.
Yeah, my grandma Ella was just a sweetheart. Yeah. So that kind of drew me more into the permanent or more hardcore kind of, attention to the winery and its various different aspects and stuff. I helped out some in the vineyard back before I took over winemaking. There were times they were behind in pruning, and he'd come in and go, "Get out of the cellar, and we need 2 more, 3 more. We need the 2 of you that are in the winery all the time out here in the vineyard get pruned and wrapped up before,
Well, you were doing a lot of marketing for him too.
I was doing a lot of marketing and sales, but I remember 91 him yanking me out into the vineyard, making me prune. So Jennifer will laugh or whatever. She's more of the grape gal. She's got more patience than I do, and I'm kind of high strung from my mother's side, I think. And so I just and I know some people that are in the wine industry will just laugh at me, but to take all day to prune 100 vines, 2 rows of 50, if you're lucky, moving fast, I just couldn't stand still long enough to be, it's just things in motion that, I don't know, being a pilot and just whatever, or the dynamics in the winery where we're doing different things versus standing here. And I understand full well, the importance of that vines being taken care of, pruning correctly, canopy management, nutrition, the whole deal. I mean, everything downstream from that, the winemaking and all the wine enjoyment, all starts with that point there. So it's like being the center on a football. He's the first guy to touch the football. Nothing else happens without that center getting that ball to the quarterback. If that doesn't happen correctly, there's nothing else. Everything else is going to fail, almost guaranteed. And so I understood the importance of that for sure, but I didn't really have it was very taxing on me to have the patience to sit out there, driving the tractor more. Okay, here we go. We got a sprayer. We're doing this, or we're hedging. Put Scotty in the tractor and go have him run rows in the grape. That was a little bit more because we had a farm down there too, so I drove the other tractors while I disked fields and pulled hay rakes and balers and stuff. I learned how to drive a stick shift. My learning to drive a stick shift was in 1972 when we first moved up. So I was 9. I turned 10 that August or something like that. And we had one of those older, it was a gray Ford, like a 19-horse gasoline-powered tractor. It wasn't powerful. It didn't really, I think they come with small loaders. This one didn't have a loader on it. And it didn't really have, I don't remember much even of a PTO. It must have had a PTO on the back, but we draw the water tank with it, and it had just a little throttle, do thing like that, and it was reverse up. It was a 3-speed or a 4-speed, I guess, for second, third, and we had a reverse, or it was reverse. But they'd send me out to water the grapes, and so that was my first experience in learning how to drive a manual transmission. Was this little 19-horse Ford kind of gray tractor, and so I'm trying to figure out where I'm going with all this, but by 87, then I stepped into definitely a more permanent kind of role there at the winery, and then, like I said, got on the state OWA board and the Oregon Wine Advisory Board, and that kind of locked things in a little bit, and then took over winemaking in about 95, and then directed and guided the winemaking at Henry Estate from 95 to 2012. When I left and we formed Seasoned Cellars, it just became not a really good fit for me anymore, working for the family. Just a lot of dynamics involved, and had an opportunity to kind of go a different direction, and Jennifer was ready to help me with all that. And so I cut my teeth just making lots of Pinot Noir there, and my winemaking style's changed dramatically over the years. I don't make wine now the way I did 5 years ago. Didn't make wine 5 years ago the way I did 10 years ago. I didn't make wine 10 years ago the way I did 15 years ago.
What are the biggest changes?
By by 2000, when I'd been winemaker for 5 years, I thought just winemaker, and I could do it. And then I look back at what I knew and what I was doing in 2000. I look at it now and I'm like, Wow. Okay. So it's that, like I said, it's that ongoing. I think any like humble or not. I'm trying to search for the right words. Down to earth, more rooted winemakers would say the same thing, that it's just progression. What we've been talking about, the variability and all this things. This sort of reminds me, she was a nurse, so human physiology and medicine is constantly changing, and they're constantly learning. It never ends. I mean, it literally never. It's just going to keep going and going and going.
Constant evolution.
And so they call themselves, when they're doing. That's why they say a doctor is practicing medicine. He has a medical practice. We have a winemaking practice. Okay, we're practicing winemaking is what we're doing.
We get one chance a year.
We only get one chance a year,
Yeah.
and we're consistent enough. We're pretty good enough at it, I think, that that we're able to get it out to the public is good. And it's like, and of course, like in the medical, if you practice wrong, somebody dies maybe or whatever, and none of that happens here in the wine industry. But the analogy is kind of the same.
I can replant a plant, but you can't.
Yeah, right. The analogy is still the same, and I refer to ourselves as the wine doctors when we show up in the cellar during harvest. We're the wine doctors. We're going to be crushing some grape and pressing that grape and crushing some other red grape later that day. Those are the work projects that we're going to do. But the first thing we do is we have various wines that are in the tanks that are they're either haven't been started, we haven't pitched the yeast yet, and they haven't started ferment, or they're in various stages of ferment or whatever, and there's temperature, thermodynamic, things that you might want to do. There's a host of various different things that you might be interested in doing if you thought you had to intervene. We're not much of an interventionist type winemaking team, but the first thing, and I learned this out at Henry Estate, is because we'd have so much to do that we'd start doing. It's like, I'll run numbers on the tanks and we'll get the punch down later. Well, guess what? With morning punch down didn't happen until 1 or 2 in the afternoon because we get busy doing all this stuff. So it's like, first things first, we're the wine doctors. We come in, these are our patients, and we need to go bedside to each one of them. And so we'll be pulling the samples, and we'll check the temperature, and we'll check the sugar, and we'll do a little sensory on it. And if it's all going good the way it should be or whatever, then it doesn't take too much time, and then we move on to the next one. And do we need to make a temperature correction? Is there anything else that we need to do to the ferment this day? If not, then we move on to the next patient, and we just kind of work our way around. And so there's an assessment of the wine patients, because the winery is really, I refer to it as this neonatal, microbiological neonatal facility is what we've got, because they're changing, and these fermentations are happening. The wines to be are very unstable. What we see on one day is not what we see on the next or the next week or whatever. And again, we have this vision of what we want to do with this grape in terms of making wine. And so we want to adjust our course, like when we're flying the plane. We have a course that we might have to adjust course because of weather or a variety of different issues or whatever. But it's a real seat of the pants kind of thing. So I do talk about us being the wine doctors. We've got to visit our patients, make the cooling adjustments. A lot of times I don't have solenoid control on the tank, so they're manual adjustments on the cooling. If I do it in the morning and I need cold on for 4 hours, then I put it on while I'm doing my work and then shut it off. If I wait until the end of the day to run that number on the tank, I'm heading home that night. That means I got to come back down at midnight or something and adjust the cooling on the tank.
If you have to.
Yeah, we'll do it if we have to, but why don't you be smart enough to do things in the right order so you don't have to do that, So first thing when we come in is check all the tanks, and take a good look at them and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, as the wine doctors, right? It's
Yeah. Well, if we have reds going, though, fermenting, we'll tend to them normally first. They'd be the first.
We get first. Because you might want a morning punch down, then we might want a mid-afternoon punch down and want an evening punch down. So, yeah, the first ones. If the reds are fermenting, we got whites and stuff. The first wines we go to in the morning are the reds. And we tend to them and punch down, assess them, and then we move to the whites. And then we can come back to them, the reds later. Yeah, so wine doctors. Making our rounds.
I like that. So tell me about starting Season Cellars. Obviously, you mentioned it's a collaborative project for the two of you, which So tell me about when you decided to get started, how you went about it, and what you kind of were setting out to do with Seasoned Cellars.
Look at that one. I'll let you start on that one. I've been talking more anyway, so.
Yeah, well, we knew when we started Seasoned Cellars, we wanted to go do something on our own, and we had been pouring and making cool climate varietals for years, so we decided we wanted to do something different than that, because I guess you could say we were felt stagnant and kind of
Not bored, but
kind of
there
stagnant.
was something more out there in the wine world for us that we hadn't found yet. We're searching for more answers out there, something more.
Well, and when you pour for people too, it's like you get a feeling for the customer, the consumer, that they might want something more too, because there are a lot of Pinot Noirs and Pinot Gris on the shelf, and we wanted to kind of have our niche and do something different.
And have a story.
And have a story. You got to have a story too.
Behind.
Yeah. And so we kind of had been going down south visiting other wineries, and down in the Rogue and the Applegate, which is encompassed with the Umpqua Valley in southern Oregon. And so we found that they were doing clarets and a lot of warm climate varietals down there, which we had never really played with much. Although Rhone and Bordeaux varietals down there, and I guess you at Henry Estates, you'd done some cab and
we had an experimental plot of small amounts, just a few rows of this and that.
Yeah, up at Airlie, cool climate. My parents planted some Cabernet Sauvignon. Well, we planted a row of Cab at first, and that got ripped out after 3 years because it was like
there's no way.
There's no way. So our other red was Maréchal Foch that we did. And, people like it because it's something different from, Pinot Noir. They're looking because Pinot Noir drinkers are adventuresome people, and they like to try different things. And so, anyway, when I was working in the vineyard at Henry Estates in that experimental plot, the Malbec that they had planted was like ripe about the same time. It was
3 weeks ahead of any of the other more. We had Cab Franc in there.
And it was like, oh my gosh, this is so good, But here in the Umpqua Valley, we're mainly cool climate, so that was on a hot year. It just isn't consistent, and so. Anyway, we decided to, and then we're out looking, with our marketing, we're in a lot of stores and stuff and looking on the shelf. And the only Malbecs you could find were from Argentina. And then, of course, Viognier was all from the Rhone region, in France. So. And they could grow it really well down there, so that's kind of why we decided to go in that direction, to not focus on Pinot Noir and the cool climates, which we had made for years already. And so
what did you have to adapt in your winemaking sort of style with different varietals than you were used to?
Every different grape varietal is different. Making Pinot Noir is not like making Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot. They all have their little idiosyncrasies.
They must be weed eating.
They're weed eating right up against the side of the building. I hope this is not too much of a And so, I'd spent most of my, the bulk of my work making mostly Pinot Noir. Like I said, we had the experimental pairings at Cab Sauv and Merlot, and we had some Cab Franc. We had a little bit of everything out there. Not everything. And Viognier, we had some Muscadet now.
Yeah,
and
lots of different stuff.
They had a little bit of Petit Verdot out there, but it wouldn't ripen, it wouldn't set very well. And the problem was that when the grapes would come in, we had a Lugana 3 December crusher, and we had the D. Franceschi press was a 35 hectoliter press, and they're bringing me like 150 pounds of grape, and I'm wanting to make this into, something that you can try to is this something we want to move forward with or whatever, but it was never enough. Honestly, I can tell you what, growing up from around wineries since I was little, I'm a really good commercial winemaker, and I'm absolutely terrible home winemaker. Some home winemakers talk to me about, it's like, don't even talk to me about home winemaking, because if I'm trying to make wine in carboys and stuff like that, it's not going to be good. I mean, I need enough to fill a barrel or two. Anyway. I need enough to fill a barrel or two. And so those varietals that we had, even though I had experience with them, it wasn't straight across. I couldn't compare that to what it would be like to try to commercially produce those varietals in terms of how we go about making wine, crushing the grape, pressing the grape, Thank God they were reds and we weren't filtering because they're itty bitty batches of white, and then you're trying to pass them through, a 40 by 40 plate and frame filter. I mean, the whole wine would get absorbed right in the filter. It doesn't work. You got to have a decent amount of it, but,
you got to play with some Viognier from when you were...
Yeah, so we had a little bit of Viognier, and we actually did some custom winemaking for Melrose Vineyard, Melrose Winery at the time before they had their winery. And, it all starts with the grape. I implore all, if there's customers and wine lovers out there that are actually, we call them consumers. I know that's not a very... it's not the best term for them. I hope they're not offended when we call you. I'm a consumer too, but we look at them as the wine consumers. They're the one with the money that are buying these wines that we're making. Right? We need them out there. We wouldn't be in business. But and I presume that most of them have never been around the vineyard or the winery during harvest time when the grapes come in. I'm astonished, honestly, at the number of people in the trade that. Wine buyers for stores and restaurants, wholesale, the sales team, the manager, the wine writers, the bloggers, all these people that are into evaluating, and they know wine. You start asking questions, and they know wine. Yeah, I mean, they're experts on wine. They know more worldly styles of wine than I do because I'm in my cellar all the time. But when you come to talking to them about grape or juice, they know nothing. Many of them have never even tried Viognier grape juice versus Mueller-Thurgau grape juice before we pitched these to make the wine. And I'm like, I can't even wrap my brain around that. Because like I said, grew up in the industry since I was a kid. And I love the juice. I wasn't really, appreciating on a level for quality wine production. I was just, and wasn't distinguishing between the Chardonnay juice and the Pinot Gris juice. It was just really good juice, But as you learn, as you get to be a winemaker, it all starts with that. Like I said, when the grapes come in and we first press out the juice, and then we do a little bit of numbers, and I'm looking just a little bit of sensory, and that first little look at it, we got a really good look, a guess at what the quality level that it is. And for most people, I'd put it in front of them. I could put some mediocre juice in front. People go, oh, yeah, it's awesome, and then I got the really good stuff there and go, now, do you see the difference? This is going to make, massively approved big commercial type, I don't want to name off some big California brand or something, but it's just going to be average wine. There's no way to take it up the ladder. You can take it down the ladder from quality, but you can't take it up the ladder. So, and then this other one's just going to make killer. So it all starts with the grape, and we, again, we're running numbers at the Henry Estate Winery, and checking the patients, and I've got Müller-Thurgau grape juice, and I got Riesling grape juice, and I've got, Chardonnay grape juice, and I've got, Pinot Noir grape juice. It's a must because it's all, and I've got all these different grape juices, and they're all grape juice, and not a one of them tastes anything like the others. I mean, most people's concept of grape juice is Welch's, in the store, Concord-based, maybe a raspberry flavored one or a white one. That's their whole concept of grape juice. I can't even drink Welch's or any of that. It tastes it just tastes like crap to me, and it's so terrible because I'm used to these juices that we create first. Because to make wine, I got to make the juice first, and then the wine comes later. And they're also different. And then even this Melrose grape that wasn't really the ripest stuff that we had in, probably, I don't think they had anything that came in over 23 sugar. And sugar, I'm just going to point this out, sugar's not really anything more than a vague indication of the ripeness of the fruit. So we don't choose to have our people bring the grape in or start the harvest process based on sugar alone. There's a range of different variables that we use, and I'm going to tell you, bricks and sugar is down at like number 4 or 5. There's at least 3 or 4 other things that we're looking at that indicate quality, ripeness, and all that maturity and all the things that we're looking for in a grape that's going to make a juice, that's going to make a wine. But the Müller-Thurgau would be like Trix cereal, like orange and cherry red and that lemon yellow. You're just getting all and you'd get to the Pinot Gris and it'd be just kind of more honey and this perry kind of apple-y things. They're really, they're very, and then I'd hit the Viognier and I'd be like, oh my God, this is like, it's like having a whole, like taking those tropical lifesavers, the tropical ones. It's like taking the whole pack of tropical lifesavers and putting the whole thing in your mouth at once. I mean, I'm getting pineapple and passion and guava and banana and wild, not just navel orange, it's mandarin or tangerine or there's something going. I mean, it's just amazing. So when we went to start season Cellars, I think I'm coming back around to try to add on to what you're saying. We wanted to go after, because we've done Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris, it's here to stay, it's great. What the Willamette Valley's done is awesome, and we wouldn't be in where we're at in the Southern Oregon wine industry if it wasn't for what Willamette Valley's done, nationally and internationally for recognition of Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris or whatever. So I'm not going to go there. But we were like, with our years of experience and everything, what's the next best? What's perfectly grown in Southern Oregon, especially if we can reach down to the south to our neighbors in the Rogue Valley and get some really good. What do they just kind of knock out of the park, out of the ground? That's going to be the next great varietal, the next thing coming. And be on a breaking wave instead of being on a wave that's already washed up on the beach and is, not that Pinot Noir is washed on the beach and coming back in any way. I'm just trying to draw these analogies or whatever. And so, and again, it all starts back with the juice, Mm-hmm. And so we get this Viognier juice from Daisy Creek Vineyard down in Jacksonville. Russ and unfortunately Margaret passed away. We get the grapes from the Rogue Valley down there in Jacksonville, and we press this grape off into juice, and this stuff is like pog. I mean, passion, orange, guava. It's just erupting out of this, and so it's like I'm looking at that. My memories of making Viognier for Melrose and what they perfectly grow, and then it's like now if we can get people to pronounce the name. And we make it in this style, you can't lose. I mean, this stuff is amazing. I mean, it's different than Pinot Gris, but it's similar. It's a fruit-forward style. We do very limited oak barrel fermentation on just 15%. The rest is all done, stainless steel, because you've got these just incredible varietal fruit quality characteristics, and you want to guide that. You want to enhance that. You don't want to get in the way with too much oak. I think a lot of winemakers over oak the Viognier. They're trying to make like Chardonnay, and I don't like, Well, it's like a lot of winemakers trying to make Syrah like Cabernet Sauvignon. They're just trying to extract every gram of tannin they can out of the fermenter, and it's like Syrah is not, if you look at Europe, which is, we're here making new world wines, but we're using old world grapes, and you can't help but not look at Europe as just a standard. It's not like we're going to try to make that. I mean, we can't really make Burgundian like the way they do in the Côte d'Or with that, limestone thing, and at Henry Estate and Early, we made a lot of dry Alsatian Gewürztraminers, but I visited like outside of Colmar before. I've been at Pierre Spar. I've seen these vineyards, that slate rock. I mean, we just don't have that here. But that doesn't mean we can't like emulate or in some way try to fashion our wines in that direction, So you're always you look at Rhone and it's like, it's raw, it's blended with Grenache and Mourvedre, and, they're not really ripping extracted, big wines. And yet I think a lot of winemakers try to do that. But back to the Viognier. Gorgeous tropical fruits. As a winemaker, before, if I'm making Chardonnay or Pinot Gris and I get just a whisper of tropical quality in that wine, I'm wet my pants. I mean, it's just like, oh my God. And then you get to Viognier and it's just like, it's so it's all tropical, It's just unbelievable. So we're like, okay, Viognier, that's the white wine. We're going to take this grape. We're going to make, and again, a lot of Viogniers made a lot of different styles, so it can be over-ripened, and I hear people with it, and I think, and again, I'm just going to say California in general, but it's just a general statement or whatever. But I've seen it in Washington too. It can be over-ripened. It can be kind of almost insipidly like sweet, even when it's dry, and very perfumey and higher in alcohol. And it's not, and sometimes it can pick up an oily quality like Gewürztraminers can and stuff. That's really not the style we're looking for. And then, like I said, often over oaked where they bury the fruit, and then easier to just ferment it bone dry, like the way we make our Sauv Blanc. Our Sauv Blanc's fermented to complete dryness. It's the way, to me, Sauvignon Blanc should be. It's the way they always are. But the Viognier, like Pinot Gris and like the Alsatian style Gewürztraminers I make, we like to leave a little threshold sugar. So 6-7 grams per liter, about 0.6, 0.7%, 0.5, somewhere in there. We use the numbers in winemaking to just kind of get us generally into a target zone, and from there it's all done sensory because every vintage is different. The acidity, the pH is different. So you can't just say, I like stopping my Viognier at 0.6%. That's my number. Right. You just can't do that. It's 0.6 at target, but like depending on everything else, we'll watch it, especially as it's coming down in sugar at the very tail end of the ferment. So the three main characteristics there then are just a hint of residual sugar, limited,
neutral
oak, mostly neutral oak. It's only 15%. That barrel is actually, so at ambient temperature, that barrel will rip through ferment in about 8 or 10 days. It'll hit maybe 80 or something, and it'll finish quick. And then we stir it. We sur-lie it like it's Chardonnay. So we'll sur-lie that barrel with a stir once a week. But in the meantime, the rest of it's in this tank back here, and it's going at about 43 degrees, really slow. And it takes about 4 or 5 weeks, and you're able to retain much more fruity characteristics in the wine. A lot of them are volatile if you can run these slow ferments. If you want fruity white wines, you have to ferment cold and slow. I can make Viognier in an IBC plastic tote with a bunch of head space on it and no temperature control. And like I've said before, you'll have Viognier. It will not be this Viognier. It won't be even close to the caliber of this wine that we can. So I'm giving away some of my winemaking secrets here. But it's no secret. There's
no recipe.
There's no real recipe. To it, but that little bit of barrel fermentation adds some mid-palate texture along with that residual sugar. The little bit of RS will allow the wine to play amazingly well on the table with spicy food. So Asian, Cajun, Caribbean, like you name it, it really rocks with spicy foods. But it doesn't have to be spicy at all. Creamy dishes, your seafood, pasta, creamy, fettuccine, seafood, whatever, clam, linguine, whatever it is. All the white meats, fish, shellfish, chicken, pork, spicy, creamy. This style of Viognier is it's about the most amazingly versatile table white wine I've ever encountered in the kitchen. I've never seen another white wine that can go so many different directions with the white meats. And it was interesting. It's like actually the style of Viognier that we like to make, the one that vision of that goal of that style of Chardonnay, because I think a lot of winemakers, they just throw a lot of darts at the walls around the winery and trying to hit a target. But we actually have a target clearly in mind of what it is that we want. We actually go source the grape to produce. Is this the way the chef would go source his meats or whatever to produce this dish, right? He just can't have, whatever food vendor showing up with whatever kind of thing and be able to achieve what he's trying to do in that kitchen. There he's sourcing out certain stuff, whatever.
Well, and the grape has to be allowed to get to the ripeness to get those flavors.
That's the third component. It's the ripe fruit.
Crucial.
Yeah.
If you don't have the flavor, you can't come up with it.
Yeah, ripe but not overripe. So, then Viognier. When it's not ripe, the citrus profile is more in the grapefruit range, but when it's ripe, it's, like I said, it's just guava, passion orange, mandarin orange, pineapple, banana. We're just getting, like, everything comes off my tongues all kind of revolves in a tropical range of things, which to me are the pinnacle of the aromas and flavor descriptors that you can get in white wine. So we knew Viognier was the answer. We just got to get everybody to be able to say it and understand it a little bit more. And I just tell them, we haven't seen a lot of it because the Willamette Valley can't do it. And so you're just seeing it from some of the warmer climate, not only in Southern Oregon. They can do a bang-up job with it out there in the Columbia Valley. Those guys out there in the Hood River Dalles area are going to be able to knock this one out of the park as well. This should be their focus white, I would think. I think they'd be amiss if they weren't after Viognier. And so balanced enough. It's got that little bit of sweetness. You got the acid balance. You got all this tropical flavor. We're hitting about 14 alcohol. Good ripe fruit. It's not hot in the finish from the ethanol, but that lends a richness and an overall quality to it. We usually win multiple gold medals with our Viognier in commercial competitions. Like, do you remember the last time we didn't win at least and we don't enter very many competitions. We probably enter about half a dozen a year, and we usually win at least two gold medals out of those 4 or 6 with the Viognier. So this is our warm country's answer to the Willamette Valley and their Pinot Gris, which again, I love Pinot Gris, it's great, but there's other wines in the world. So we're talking about edge of the box varietals that we're marketing. So in the middle of the white wine box is Pinot Gris and Chardonnay. People they just can't hardly get their blinders open to be after something else. And once you get that box a little bit bigger, varietals like Viognier and Sauvignon Blanc and some others like Albarino and others that are grown well down here or orbiting a little farther out. We were working for the first couple, Gruner Veltliner. We were working for the first couple 3 years with a Marsanne-Roussanne blend, but honestly we couldn't sell it very well just because I think those varietals are orbiting too far out there. They're like Pluto and Uranus, and people just can't get there, where they can get to Viognier. They can maybe get to Albarino's probably more like Jupiter. So it's out there a little bit, but it's not as far out as Marsanne and Roussanne. Viogniер's just orbiting right in around that box. I just know it's hovering right in there. And once people see a style like this, it's gonna catch on, and they're gonna love this thing. So that was the story on the white. And then what about the red? How did we figure out what red it was going to be?
Well, we were down tasting some. We had some clients wanting us to source some reds for them, and so we had the opportunity to go. Some bulk wines.
They wanted to pull in some Merlot or some of this that were available in bulk and have us Syrah and have us bottle it for them.
But we were able in some of these wineries to taste some of the others, and Malbec is out there. Argentina has it. I mean, it's all over the place.
We went to wineries like Del Rio and Roxy Ann Winery and Wooldridge Creek. Greg and Carr out there in the Applegate Valley, and they'd show us some of the bulk wines that were available. And then we came across some bulk Malbecs that were available that they'd made. And I remember Jennifer, we were in the lab there at Roxy Ann, and he brought in a bunch of beakers, some different stuff, and had a graduated cylinder and some glasses, and we're sitting in their lab. He's like, yeah, man, have some fun, see what you're, and we're looking at and we're still trying to debate what's the red focus going to be? We got we knew the white was going to be Viognier. It says, what's the next red that's going to be just hotter than a lava rock and perfectly grown down here? And then we came across some of these batches, and I remember the look on your face. You stuck your nose in that glass and pulled it up, and you were like, oh my God, and you taste it, it's like blackberry and marionberries and violets and just
lavender and
big and full on the palate, but soft and round and tannins and just the perfect balance on it. And so we did a little more, and we walked away with that experience. And then, that was in our brain while we were doing research and looking in, like she said, grocery store. You'd go into grocery store set and you'd see, the Pinot Noir category and the Cab Sauv and the Merlot. They all got their sign up there and all that. And then,
all of that.
Yeah, you got it. Well, usually Syrahs were in the other reds. It's usually, Pinot Noir, Cab Sauv, Merlot, about the only ones they actually hang a sign over, like this is the section in the store where you get the wine. And then you got the other reds, so you got Zins and the Petit Syrahs and the Cab Francs and everything else is in there. And, you'd go hunting for domestic Malbec, and like Jennifer said, by God, it wasn't there. You could not find it. And, if you wanted to find the Malbec, you had to go to the import section, and there's, all the Argentinian stuff. And they've been growing Malbec in Southern Oregon down there. It's nothing new, man. It's been in the ground for 30 years like these other varietals, but it was never looked at as a singular varietal or standalone varietal. I think it was always just Malbec's a blending grape, you blend it into Cab Sauv and whatever, and I think that's the way it was kind of approached. And so we thought, well, this is either really good or really bad. Why is there no domestic Malbec out there, and can we produce domestic Malbec? And we know we're going to be more expensive than the big mass-produced Argentina ones, but compared to what we saw that was available bulk from Roxiana, the tanks, I make anything like that or better. And we got something here. This is and so then you look at it and it's like, well, hey, now look at this picture. They do all these Bordeaux varietals down there. They grow a lot of Cab Sauv and Merlot down there or whatever. And the Malbec comes in a week to a week and a half ahead of the Cab Sauv and Merlot. It's the earliest ripening of all the Bordeaux varietals. And that was another reason why, because we're kind of the alternate varietal winery. And so when we look at the Bordeaux range, the first one obviously is Cabernet Sauvignon. Everybody loves it. It's the most popular red wine in the world, right? But it's there's a million players out there. California knocks it out of the park. Washington's killer. That's not even talking about European, Bordeaux or wherever. It's all over the place. It's is this an arena we want to jump into? It's man, we're going to get slaughtered, And Jennifer and I strongly feel that the world does not need another Merlot. It's not. It's done. It's over. I'm not taking the sideways approach or whatever. It's just as a winemaker and a wine producer, all the Bordeaux varietals are somewhat one-dimensional. The least dimensional of all of them is Merlot. It's
for us anyway.
It's less dimensional than any of the others when it's even done kind of right. And I understand why it's so popular. It's a big mouthful around red fruit, and I get it. It's because so many of the things, it's got to be played to the masses, right? That's why. Pinot Noir takes a little bit better understanding of the nuances and the layers, and it's not all about power. If Cabernet Sauvignon's a freight train, then, Pinot Noir is a sports car, right? You put it on like a jet suit, right? You don't get in it and ride it down the track and blow over anything that's in front of it like Cab Sauv, right? So, but even though we're sourcing grapes from these different producers, it's imperative that we get ripe grape, that
consistent every
Jennifer's
year, even
mentioned,
on cool years. If you're going to be a commercial winery,
it's got to be. 30 years ago, you could get away with these green apple tart Oregon Chardonnays or whatever, but green bean cabs or whatever. It's just that day is long gone. There's so many players and producers out there in the American wine industry now, and the quality level, for various reasons, some of which we were talked to just a while ago, has gone up dramatically, which is a great thing for the consumer. Because even at, I always tell people you don't have to spend a lot of money on a bottle of wine. Our Malbec ranges from 22 to 30 a bottle or whatever. If you do spend a lot of money on a bottle, it damn well better be good. But there's 15. I've been impressed with some $15 bottles out there from some producers. They're like, this is pretty good. This is something you can have on. I realize that our wine, we don't produce wines that are everybody's everyday drinking wine. People still need that Wednesday evening cheeseburger, pizza, spaghetti. We just need some red wine. It doesn't got to be Opus One. Kind of thing like that. So, but it's imperative that the grapes that we get are ripe, and then we're the alternate varietal winery. So when you look at the others, like, Cab Franc's one where, I've had some that were just mind-blowing. They're really, really good. But I've had so many that are just, they're weak, they're thin, they're acidic, they're over-vegetal. They're just, I understand why it's a blending grape, because you can't get... and then Petite, go ahead.
Even the Rogue Valley doesn't have enough heat to consistently get Cab Franc.
Yeah, normal to warm years, they can pull it off down there, but cooler years like 10 and 11, even the Rogue Valley, they can't get the Cab Franc off, right. And then Petit Verdot, another one, really late ripener. What are the chances you're going to rock the world with Petit Verdot? I don't know. And then, then you got Carmenere, the Bordeaux varietal number 6. There's another one, very rare. Everybody thought the thing was extinct until 1994, and hello, now it's it's available in Chile. We actually produce, we make a Carmenere, and we blend it with Sangiovese into our super Tuscan blend called Phoenix. So we have a lot of experience with that varietal. So that kind of just went back to like, wow, it's the earliest Malbec, it's the earliest ripening of all the Bordeaux varietals. It's easy. We don't have the pronunciation that we got with Viognier. It's like anybody never even heard it could probably look at it and get the word out, right? Pretty straightforward. Thanks to Argentina, most red wine drinkers know what it is. It's the worldwide known, grape varietal. And so we moved in 2012. We went back to Roxy and said, hey, you guys make some wonderful Malbec. Why don't you think about selling us some grape? Because I know that, again, that whole thing that I said before, if the Malbec wine that they're making is awesome, the grape's got to be good because it only stays the same or goes down. It doesn't go better. You can't, right? That makes sense, right? So, they're like, well, we've never sold grape to anybody before. They normally don't do that, but they had extra Malbec coming up over the next few seasons and were willing to work with us. So, but it's, there's some difficulties because a lot of outfits that are into like selling grape, when you contract the grape price with a seller that usually includes delivery, they're going to bring it to the winery. And that was Roxy Ann's thing. They're like, but we don't, we're not in the grape selling business. So you want it, you're bringing your bins down, we're picking on that, then we tell you when it's done, and you come down and get the bins and take it away. So Scott and Jennifer had to become truck driver, had to become truckers. This is like truck and go pilot. When we grab the pickup truck and a trailer and head down to, Rogue Valley to pick up some grape and haul it back over the passes on the freeway, and get it home and get it here in the cellar and stuff like that. So we've Roxy Ann used their Malbec to go into their claret blend, and now I think they're making one out on their own. It might be for the tasting room only. It's been 10 years now since we first bought Malbec from Roxy Ann, and we were one of the very first wineries in Oregon to kind of feature it, as our forward red varietal number 1. And from my understanding now, this is 2022, I could be wrong, but if I understand right, Malbec's the fastest growing red varietal in Washington now the last 2 years. They're planting amazing, the most of what's going in the ground up there red-wise, and what I heard is Malbec. And so we're gonna, that validates to me what we were thinking 10 years ago down here, in Southern Oregon, that this grape varietal's on its way, and if you can get a hold of grape of that caliber and we can make wine, we can stay out of the way. We call ourselves the caretakers of the fruit. So when you have superior grape, it'll almost make itself. And the best thing that we can do is to stay out of its way and just be there when necessary, but not to intervene or be trying to influence its process, too heavily. So I call ourselves the caretakers of the fruit, sitting in the barrels right there, and we're sweeping the floor underneath, and just keeping things tidy around there while they're doing their thing. And and you don't top them too often because we don't want a lot of air to get into the barrel. But on a couple 3-month interval, we'll pull the silicone bungs and get in there and do our sensory and do our lab work and top them all up nice and full and stuff. But we love Malbec, hearty roast steak stews, and love chèvre goat cheese. Anything with the chev in it is out of the park with it. And what's interesting, also, you want to talk about its other attribute?
Yeah, it's one of the only reds that complement spicy, hearty dishes. So it likes anything with chorizo in it. You know, jambalayas, things like that.
Works my jambalaya with a cayenne in it. In all my years of wine and food pairing, I've had 2 anomalies that I've never, it's been 30, 40 years now, 30 years plus, and I still have not, a lot of them never been able to solve the anomalies. One of them is wine and Mexican food. I don't know what it is. I compare wine with about every other ethnic cuisine in the world, but I have this really ongoing difficult trouble pairing wine with Mexican food. I don't know what it's all the corn in, masa type thing, that I don't know what it is. It's just a hard match. So I always say that the best wine with Mexican food is cerveza or margarita. That's the best wine to have.
Although this goes great with the mole.
It does, yeah. The Malbec actually does.
And the Carmenere. Yeah.
It does the spice with the cinnamon in there and the chocolate and the mole and stuff like that. So my other anomaly has been red wine and spicy food. For me, and again, this is very subjective what we're talking about, but most red wines do not handle spicy foods very well. Cab Sauv, Merlot. I don't think Pinot Noir is a varietal that handles spicy dishes very well. I see it. You go into an Asian place and they got curries and they got Pinot Noir and a Pinot Noir don't go with curry. I mean, it doesn't for me anyway. And it doesn't take much pepper on a steak, and Cab Sauv, to me, it's like fanning the fire. I mean, it's just like throwing gasoline on a fire, and again, this is very subjective, this wine and food pairing thing. There's, you want to look at there's one way to look at it. You want to complement things and or you want to elevate things, that, I don't know. That throwing gas on the fire thing doesn't work for me very well. But if a wine's got a deep core of fruit, they can handle, higher alcohols like a Zinfandel. We're not high alcohol. We're usually around 14 with a Malbec. But it takes something like that to be able to handle the spice of some dishes, So all my spicy dishes out of the wok and these other things all revolve around chicken or seafood, so that I can be out there, I'm pairing it with the white wines, But it's like, what do you do for red wine if you're doing that spicy, Mongolian beef stir fry or something, And one of my first experiences with it, we were having a meal after we did a pouring at a restaurant in Eugene on 5th Street Market. It's not there anymore. It was called the Lucky Noodle. They used some of our wines. I don't know if you've ever been there or not, but they were, it was funny. It was a Lucky Noodle, and it was like, well, what kind of noodle? And you go in there, like half the menu was Italian noodles and half the menu was Asian noodles. It was all noodles, but every dish was noodles, but it was like 2 totally different cuisines of noodles, which as a foodie, you're like, oh, that's great. And I tend to go more toward the Asian noodles. I love Asian food and that spice and how you handle it with food. And we had that salad. It was like the Tears of the Tiger salad. It was that marinated skirt steak on a salad with that hot Asian oil, and I mean, like a couple, 3 bites, and you'll stop before you fork in that 4th one. I mean, you're trying to catch your breath a little bit. It's pretty hot, It is Tears of the Tiger. It's right up in there where we like it, but we were chasing it with the transparency, and it was working. The transparency white blend was doing the spice, but with the steak in my mouth, I felt like I had marbles in my mouth with this white wine. It's like, geez, you'd love to find a red wine that would go with this, and we paired it with we put it with a Syrah that we had at the time. Nuts, 2 thumbs down. It was like, this is bad, And then just for kicks, I threw the Merlot in the glass, or the Malbec, excuse me. There, you can call it Merlot. Somebody slapped me. We shot the Malbec at it, and like, oh my God, look at this. This actually works. I had to go back and do it again. Am I imagining this? Or like getting that hot oil and the steak and everything, and then I got the Malbec, and it's like, it kind of calms it down a little bit, and you got the marinated steak, and you got a red wine, which is what you're supposed to do, and it's just all I was like, wow, this is amazing. Jennifer, try this. The Malbec come back, try the Syrah with this. And it's like, it's terrible again. And they come back and put a little Malbec in here and try it with it. It's just like unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So that's a great attribute of the Malbec too, is that it pairs incredibly well with spicy dishes, or at least moderately spicy food. If you go off the deep end with it, then probably not. You're back to very cold white that's got some sugar. You're going to have some sweetness, because that's a pretty standard thing. I mean, even in the kitchen, it's a heat. You got to heat, and you want to work it, and it's got to be sweet. So, I mean, that's why, mango habanero. That's why that's why this is coming together. And it's true. It always works that way. I've been told if you're ever in the back of those Thai kitchens, you'd be surprised how much sugar is going into those curries, because you can't just hit it with the curry and curry. So you're up in the spice level, and then they got to get sugar in there to provide this kind of balance and stuff like that. So you can tell we're foodies. We like to eat, like to cook. What we're doing, making wine, it's a very hedonistic thing, and the food is the same way. It's extreme. To me, it's extreme hedonism. So we have to eat a couple of times a day to survive. And so we tend to make we've built this ritual around the whole thing, right? It's vast. It's like a mandala. It's got a lot of different factions of it that come together that you can endorse all of them or parts of it or whatever. But we do this dance around the food, and that's why, in the house, the most important room is the kitchen, right? And when you're even at somebody's house, or it's a house party, or we got friends over and we're yucking it up and having a great time, where does it always gravitate to? It always gravitates to the kitchen. We're always in the kitchen, or we're not far from it. It's the most important room. We can say bathrooms too, because we got that end of things. It's got to happen too, but I don't know if that goes so far as being hedonism or whatever. But
we're not congregating.
We're not all congregating in the bathroom, one at a time. But the beginning of it, the hedonism of the food, and then the wine and the whole thing, starts to go over beer, craft cider. Now we've got all these craft distilleries. It's amazing, this gastronomic explosion that's happened in the last 30 years, because when I was a kid, it was it's Chinese food, the Chinese food, that's all and then some Thai restaurants started showing up, but there wasn't many back in the day. It was you went to the Chinese restaurant if you wanted Asian food, and now we've got Vietnamese and Korean and Filipino, and all this stuff's coming out, and they're all different, and they're all so good. I love Asian food, but it's sushi. When I would travel to do sales for Henry Estate, and I'd hit big city like Atlanta or Orlando, that's the only place I'd go hit the sushi bars, because I had to go to Portland.
To find
find sushi. Once I learned to like it, it's oh, this is really good, but we don't have, you got to go to the big city to even find this thing. Now it's in the grocery stores, Fred Meyer, Safeway. Every grocery store's got sushi in there right now. And then the sushi Eugene, right down by 5th Street there, you can swing us. You can throw a few rocks in any direction. There's about 5 sushi outfits right there right off of Broadway area right there. They're all over the place, and it was just great, because sushi's awesome, and it's its own culinary, artistic creation. It's just fabulous watching the guys make it and to eat it, and fresh and everything. But my example is just that 30 years ago you couldn't hardly find sushi unless you went to Portland, and now you don't have to go hardly across the street, and it's right in front of you, all over the place. So we've had this gastronomic explosion of different cuisines and just different beverages. Now we've got craft breweries, not just the big ones or whatever. And, Gavin from Sundance Wine Cellars, when I was in there last year, he was telling me about how much fascination he's got with the tea house that he goes to, because I'm not a big tea fan. She likes tea. I've had some. They're pretty good. And I understand very ancient beverage, huge culture steeped in tea all around the world. cultures all over the place, and then, but, and he told me the same thing. Well, there's tea you can get, like, Lipton or whatever, and then there's tea, and then there's really, these craft teas. He goes to the tea house, they have these craft teas, they sit around and, like, it's really cool. There's just so many, and now we're seeing creameries all over, like it used to be Tillamook and Bandon, and now we've got like creameries all over, or craft creameries making these cheeses that are just unbelievable, right from the cows that are here in Oregon, and these are just examples of this gastronomic expansion that we've gone into, and we're so lucky here, all of us in Oregon, and really, well, we're blessed on the West Coast, California, Washington, for vinifera. We own vinifera production. Wine's made in 50 states around the country, but they don't make it California, Oregon, Washington got it down. Nobody can produce wines of the vinifera. Most of them are all, hybrid based or whatever. So we've got that going for us. But the bounty of Oregon that we have here is just unbelievable, whether it's the inland stuff, and we got the Pacific Ocean right over here. So we've got all this seafood, the fish, the oysters, the Dungeness crab. It just goes on and on and on and on of this bounty that we have here. And then we have, this elevated wine culture, wine production culture that, like I said, has come a long ways in 30 years. It's rising to match this level of quality of other foods, or however you want to, beverages, or just things we can, I don't know what package what box you want to put it in, but it's all part of that, hedonistic lifestyle, having the wines and trying to source some really good food and checking out somebody else's really good food, and just, the other beverages and the things and everything that we can have to, life's short on this planet and then you're gone. So, you might as well enjoy it, and I'd rather have a pint of Hop Valley Alphadelic than try to slam a 6-pack of PBR or something. I just, like, stuff's disgusting to me. I just don't even, I know the masses go after or whatever. I just don't understand. I can't fathom it. Like I said, they drink Folgers coffee and I can't, So,
elevated tastes.
Yeah.
Well, I could go on a little bit and take the devil's advocate of the other side of that with food, because there is some cheap stuff out there that I do like, that I shouldn't like, and I do. Maybe I'll just leave it. I won't say specifically what it is, but
guilty pleasures.
Yeah, and it might even be, like some fast foods or whatever, that, like, talking about all this stuff, you think you couldn't build stomach fast food, but there are some places that, like, it shouldn't be good to me. It should taste like Alpo dog food, but it's like, I could eat another one, or whatever. So, so that puts me right in there with the masses. That I'm not trying to put them down. It's just, so many things are made. They make food bland just because people can't handle the spice, So when they say curry, I'm wanting curry. I'm not one to just, like, have to hunt for the taste of curry. It should be right up in your face, pretty strong, And so, yeah, I think that's a lot of what drives us to. And just, Jennifer says it's a rich lifestyle. We don't have a lot of money, but we have a pretty rich lifestyle in the things that we get to do and, eat and experience.
The last thing I'm going to ask is just tell me about what's next for the two of you and for Seasoned Cellars.
I don't know. Start.
Well,
it's hard to.
Well, I don't know. We just want to continue, I guess our goal with Seasoned Cellars and the way we are marketing it is we're taking the wines out of Southern Oregon, and we think Southern Oregon is God's country to raise grapes. It's a secret to a lot of people down here, and there's a lot of wineries that just sell out of their tasting room. That's the only place you can get it, or join their wine club online or something like that. But we've found that with taking our wines up into the Portland area and out of Southern Oregon, that we are touching so many people that didn't realize that we were even down here. People that are just moving into the state, all they know is about the Willamette Valley, and they're just like blown away with that we even have wineries, down here. And so that's kind of the direction we're going. We think that, Southern Oregon is just starting to grow here. And we label our wines as Southern Oregon. We don't put Umpqua because most people wouldn't even know where that's at. Even the Rogue, the people are pretty vague with that, although that name's been out there for a while.
Yeah.
But anyway, we just kind of want to be pioneers of promoting these warm climate varietals that are so special from down here in Southern Oregon. So, I don't know.
And for us, I think it's a growth thing. When we formed Seasoned Cellars in 2012, our first year we made 6 different wines from 11 different grape varietals. 5 of those varietals we'd never made before when we jumped in doing this. And we can only learn so much by drinking other people's wines. The way we learn about these grape varietals is to bring a ton or so of this grape in, to crush it, press it, ferment it. We'll cellar it, we'll see how it stands alone, we see how it blends with other varietals, and then it gives us great insight, again, to have that vision and focus for sourcing grape to make a particular style of wine, like the Viognier, or our most popular wines are Transparency White Blend, which is a semi-sparkling blend of Mueller, Thurgau, Muscat, and Riesling, so very light, bright, and clean, and refreshing. And so, we've been having a blast making wines from different grape varietals that we've not worked with before. And in some of we actually do some custom craft work, custom winemaking for some other wineries, and has included making styles of, like, for instance, rosé. We just now have a rosé out for the first time in the last couple of years on our own label. We've been making rosés for a number of years for other people, and we've made them from Pinot Noir and Syrah. And in 19, we made one from Tempranillo. It was just amazing. And then now, as we're starting to do our own, it gives us a lot of, we got to kind of hone our rosé making skills, making wine for other people, right? And then now, not that we would always make the very best we could, but we know more about it now to be able to produce out under our own label. So, and then other varietals, like we've made now like 3 Gruner Veltliners from some grape for other people. And boy, that one was at 18 or 16, 18. Mm-hmm. Oh, that thing was so amazing. Mango out of it was like, oh my God, this stuff's incredible. It's like, we want to make Gruner and put it out on our own label and go out and market it. And God, I don't know, it's probably harder than selling Marsanne Roussanne right now. But you look at the wine and go, geez, this stuff's really good. Man, I could just sit and drink a lot of this stuff. I know a lot of people would. So, and when we first made Gruner, we'd never made one before. So, like I said, when there's this standard, when you're making Pinot Noir, you've got this Burgundy out there, or when you're making Cab Sauv or Merlot, you're looking at a board. You have some kind of standard, but I'd only had half a dozen 8 Gruners in my life. I'd the Austrians ones mostly. Honestly, when Russell planted it over here 20 years ago, I'd never even heard of the stuff. I had no idea what it was, and was very skeptical at the beginning. And then another guy's growing it. We're making wine for another outfit from his grape. It comes through the cellar. There's Gruner in the bin for the first time. I've never made it before, What are we shooting for? What's our target, Now we've come to really have a fascination for it, although we're not going to debut it under our label right now. We have enough whites to play with. Maybe in the future. I think there's a bright future for it based on the wine itself. The name, it's like trying to sell Gewürztraminer out there. You try to get people on board with Gruner Veltliner, you got a little bit of a hard road to hoe on this one, But again, if the caliber of the wine is there, then, it's there. Ultimately, you would think that would produce a victory, for the varietal and those who are making it. But, not so much so. So for us, doing what she's talking about, taking the wines out there, learning and growing more, there's more for us to learn and experience with these, grape varietals, different grape varietals that we maybe have access to, and bring them in here, and continue to develop our winemaking skills. It's so strange because what we start with and what we end up with are two different things. We start with grape juice and we end up with wine. And chemically, these are two totally different substances. And so I kind of refer to the cellar as a cocoon. During harvest, it's the chrysalis. We come through the door, we're like entering a chrysalis where we're taking caterpillars, which would represent the grape, and we're making butterflies, which would represent the wine. And in between is this phenomenal, I call it the grand metamorphosis. And I see, because I get older and older, it's like, man, are we ready for these 14-hour days around? I'm getting old for this stuff, And then the first grapes show up, and I'm like, wow, look at this grape, look at this juice, And then a few days later, when it's fermenting in the tank, it's like, oh shit, well, it just fuels an incredible amount of energy for the campaign of a harvest. And we call it is like a campaign when the grapes are coming in ripe and the whole fermentation and that whole thing. And, during that fermentation process is when we're in the cocoon, is the time really when, us as winemakers have an influence as to the style of butterfly that we're going to produce. What are we going to make, a monarch? Are we going to do that? What are we going to do with this grape? We'll try to go source the grape and then help facilitate that metamorphosis from the caterpillar, to the butterfly. And like we said, we need to have nice, ripe, healthy caterpillars. I got to have good, ripe fruit. If you've got a weak caterpillar coming into the chrysalis, to the cocoon, you're going to have a harder time cranking out a really beautiful butterfly. And I think a lot of, I've had wines, some winemakers and wineries, they're not making butterflies, they're making moths. They get a caterpillar in, but it's a moth that comes out the other. Sorry, it's just the way it is. And these are beautiful butterflies, and I think that's the fascinating thing. I think that's what keeps us going a lot, is that we never quite know what's around the corner the next day, and then we're, it's coming at us, and then we're dealing with it, and what can that happen? It's exciting
because it's different every year.
Yeah, it's always. It never comes out the same way twice. But like I said, I really implore, I've said this over and over, consumers, in fact, I didn't really finish that comment, to get out. The best time to try wine, to hit wineries, is in late September and early through mid-October while harvest is happening. And you can ask, all you can do is say no. But usually they're like us, they're wanting to educate people and get them more involved with the process that we go through. So, it'll be anywhere from, the assistant winemaker might bring a couple samples of some beakers of some stuff up into the tasting room. They might take you back into the lab where they've got more, like, well, this is what we're working on today, and we've got the samples are already pulled. Or what, they might even take you back into the cellar and, like, hey, this is fermenting, And the best way would be to do that same winery and ask about that same wine, like to say they're doing a cold slow ferment on a Pinot Gris, and be there when it's juiced before they pitch the yeast, and then be there like a week later or a few days later right after it started fermentation, and be there a few days later when it's farther through the ferment, and a few days later, and see this progression of the caterpillar to the butterfly. Because there's so many wine experts out there, but they don't know anything about grape. And what we need is, we need to have grape and juice experts to make, this, to be experts in the wine too. It'd be like knowing all the best cooked prime rib, and the places to go get it, and the price and everything, but you don't know anything about the cow, you don't know prime versus choice, you don't know marbling, you don't know preparation. All you know is what's good prime rib, you don't know, you can't elaborate at all. And for us, it's all matter so much so that we put it on the label, our season rows with the winter, spring, summer, and fall, and the sun in the middle, and the dance that we do every year as we go around in the wine industry. And like Jennifer said, we only get one crack at this per year. Beer and spirits, beer, they get water, malt, hops, and yeast, and they're making beer next week, and our raw sourcing ingredients only happens one time a year. So we're making wine all year long, but we only get one chance at it a year. So you only get so many laps around the sun before your time's done, and over. And I would implore them to try to get out to some wineries and try, if nothing else, try some of that. Because if I had Viognier that was comes in about 25 bricks, and we had some of that when it was about 22 or 21, just starting to ferment, fizzing, a little yeasty, it's starting to get a little turbid and cloudy because the ferment's starting, 21 sugar and about 1.5 alcohol, and I poured that for you, you'd go through the ceiling. You'd be like, oh my God. And it's like, yeah, the wine's so good because this is what we're starting with. The grapes are so good to begin with, and we're very careful in preserving, being the caretakers of the fruit. And, like I said, I'd like to say, if we're wanting to, if there's any truth to this elusive concept of terroir, then it's our mission as winemakers to try to capture the essence of the vineyard in the bottle as best we can. And so limited, some new oak, but 10 to 12%. You don't want to over oak the wines because you don't really want to get in the way of that. If the fruit's good, it's back to the cook shift. If that salmon fillet is good, you don't want to mess with that thing too much. You want a little seasoning or whatever, but you don't want some big heavy ass sauce on the thing that's going to destroy the natural beauty and essence of what's underneath it. And that's what we're trying to do winemaking too. We want to see that fruit like fly. We want to see it elevated, and so we want to do the winemaking and the things that we can in a very minimalistic, low oxygen situation to be able to carry that fruit forward and have that butterfly, fly, beautiful, and people just like, oh, it's so pretty, it's like, look at this, it's so, and it's taken years and years and years to, think about it this way, because I'll be in another winery and going, hey, it's cocoon time, right? Caterpillars to butterfly. They're like, what? And I'm like, what we're doing with grapes, it's like chemically it's totally different than the wine, and so it's that great transition, I think, that happens. It's so much fun to see it. We can't wait to see it happen again this next year, and to be a part of it, and watch this whole thing happen, and be a part of it is really, I think, is really pretty special. You must have something more you want to say.
Well, and it's just the two of us. We have no employees here, so we're pretty in tune with how we want things done. I don't think we could hand it over to someone and it would happen the same, So we'll probably work season Cellars until we can't work it anymore.
It'd be like being an executive chef and trying to teach another chef to try to make what I want, and again, that chefing is very, you start with a recipe, but you're tasting along the way and going, it needs more of this and less of that, and it's like, it's a give and go kind of thing, and, that's, I think, a lot of the fascination of the whole thing, and the seat of the pants, keep you on your toes kind of thing that the winemaking involves. I don't know, the grapes they grow, it's really slow. And then they put the grape clusters out. The winemaking's more dynamic, so that's back to my wanting more, having more fun or being more interested in the things that are a little bit more dynamic in nature than. But the grapes are so important. It's so amazing what we have here in Southern Oregon, and in Oregon in general. What we have to work with and where we're trying to kind of go with it. And so, hopefully, we'll see maybe some different varietals that might come out later if we can advance our lineup a little bit, or whatever. Maybe we will make a Gruner Veltliner. I don't know. We keep making a couple of really nice ones with these other people, and we do this custom winecraft. We're like surrogate winemakers. So sometimes we'll make these amazing wines, but then the case goods go to the winery that contracted us to make it. I'm like, can I have 6 bottles of it? We'll try it. Oh, this is so good. But it's not like us where we make a wonderful Viognier, and I got as much of it as I want. I got pallets of it, so Scott's got, plenty of his own wines that I love or whatever, and that's fun too. That keeps you on your toes because you're making wine for somebody else instead of you. So I'm trying to get out of them exactly what style it is that you're looking for, and then try to hit that target as close as we can. So always up for a challenge. So I think the wine industry, the winemaking, keeps us challenged on a pretty regular basis. So
And doing the cells.
yeah, well, that's the biggest challenge. There's so much wine out there. So our nickname for ourselves is Secret Cellars. So we've been actually called Secret Cellars before, because we're 10 years old now, and we make phenomenal wines, and some of the best in the state for sure. Our Sauvignon Blanc's in the current issue of the Wine Press is a Cellar Select, and so many other awards. But nobody really knows who we are, because we're not the best at marketing. I didn't go to school for marketing. That wasn't my thing. It's not really what I wanted to do. I wanted to do science and engineering, and we kind of this is a blend. I kind of refer to us as wine engineering, because we're taking, it's very much of a process engineering type approach. Again, we're starting with something that what we end up with is entirely different. So, if you're taking chemicals and you're extruding plastic parts, I had a roommate at Oregon State, went to work for a plastic extrusion outfit that made parts for batteries, separators and stuff like that. There's this process going along, and you just can't just uniformly accept what comes out of the other side of the extrusion machine. There's a QC process that, is it meeting the specs that we're looking for, and, its integrity and quality and all that. And so we're doing that with the wine as well too. What we start with and what we end up with are different. And people are always like, "Oh, the science of winemaking." I'm like, "Yeah, well, it's more like engineering, because we have microbiological issues to deal with. We have chemical issues to deal with. We have thermodynamic issues to deal with. We have mechanical issues to deal with. We have all of this going on, and we're going to kind of erect it and put it together in various different configurations to get what it is that we're wanting to do." And some of these things, like this semi-sparkling white blend or that Viognier, don't end up being in the bottle looking like that by accident. It's not an accident. It's very kind of premeditated. It's going to vary because of the nature of the vintages and everything, but we're fairly premeditated and geared toward this objective. This is what we're looking for, and we have this target in mind. When we don't get there, then you've already made that wine, but next year you're going to maybe do things different. Like I said, every year my winemaking changes. I still don't. I made changes a couple of years ago. I'm doing some things now that I didn't even do at my 23rd year of directing winemaking or whatever. Some new techniques and some things like that were easy to implement into the cellar. It makes sense. I think it's adding to wine quality, and we're doing that now. I can elaborate, digress, and talk about what it is, but it's that whole process of turning the juice into wine and what it is that we're looking for that's a lot of fun. And like I said, it's kind of we're drawing many aspects of various different kinds of science, and then we're putting this together in an engineering format where we're going to engineer this semi-sparkling, light, sweet, fruity thing that's a blend of 3 different varietals. It's not a field blend. They're fermented all separately in the tanks, and then a blend occurs, cross-flow filtration, sterile bottling, colds, carbon dioxide involved. When we're bottling, it's different than bottling the other one. I bottle reds. Bottling days for transparency are entirely different than bottling days for red. We have a whole different set of objectives and variables involved with it. It's not the same. It's actually, between these two, it's not even close. They're way different from each other. Getting that CO2 in there, temperature's got to be down. This wine's bottled at we're near 32 when we're coming out of the tank with a 5-degree drop. So we're hitting the bottle at well under 40 degrees on bottling days, and that has its associated problems and issues. And so all of a sudden we're thinking thermodynamics, and how are we going to hold the temperature down? How can we do this better? We're bottling reds at room temps. Who gives a crap? It's all going in the bottle at 55, 60 degrees, which is what, so there's all these different things we've got to be thinking about. You got to be on your toes about it. And it's just like, think it's pretty fun. It keeps us
Keeps us going.
keeps us driven to what's around the next, what's around the next corner, whether it's a new varietal or, something, one of the other variables involved, or a new vineyard source. We've been making Sauvignon Blanc now for several years, and only 2 years in a row did the Sauvignon Blanc ever come from the same vineyard source. It's been from that varietal's been from a different vineyard source almost every time we've made it, and they're different. They've all been different. It's been eye-opening. I'd made some Sauvignon Blanc before, but we decided in 2015 we were going to bring it in to phase out the Marsanne Roussanne, and let's go with another fruit-forward white Sauvignon Blanc to back up the Viognier, perfectly grown here in Southern Oregon. A range of different styles of Sauvignon Blancs out there, from the Kiwi ones to the French ones to I refer to ours as more of a California style, up around 14 alcohol, ripe fruit, much more tropical notes, less of the grass and that cat piss smell that you come to associate with certain styles of Sauvignon Blanc, which is good. I mean, it's
distinctive.
You're looking for the cat piss, It's like, people are going, what? And other people are laughing and going, it's there. It's like, it's like that petrol fusel oil thing that Riesling does, the German Riesling things do, and you get that in front of some people, and then you talk petroleum and kerosene, and then they pick it up. They're like, they don't.
Did you put in there?
How much kerosene did you put in your Riesling? And they think it's just bizarre, and it's just like, well, you ever had any German Rieslings before? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, you should, because they're the crowned worldwide champions of Riesling, and they have been for centuries. And this is what they do when they age out. And after a while, you come to look for it. You're like, where's that little bit of fusel oil, that fusel oil smell in there or whatever. But that making wine from all those different vineyard sites, it's the same varietal, but it's come from different sources. The one we have now is for our first Umpqua Valley one. We had to get grape. We got grape from here for it, where we were always kind of been doing it from the Rogue Valley. And the next year, where I got a contract, we're bouncing back to Rogue Valley Sauvignon Blanc grape again. We're going back south again. So it's kind of fun. You learn a lot about all of these attributes and the
That's one plus with not having the vineyard is, and then there's not good things
the
about
downside of not having your vineyard too.
So anyway, it's the smoke taint thing is made some wineries from up north, bigger wineries come in and just buy lots.
We're seeing
take it away from small little boutique, And
we're looking for little 1-2 ton batches out of the vineyard, and wineries are coming in buying a whole vineyard block. It's kind of gone actually from what was really a buyer's market for grapes in the last few years ago. Over the last 2 years now, it's changed much more to a seller's market, and we're having a harder time locating some of these varietals. For purchase to bring in, or whatever, including like Viognier and some others that are, our main varietals. I got to have this stuff. I'm hearing guys are going, well, I'm going to Walla Walla. And I'm like, I ain't going to Walla Walla. We're a Southern Oregon producer. I got to find it down here in the Rogue and Umpqua, or I'm not going to be able to make it. So, so there's a downside to not growing your own grapes, but we don't have the investment, and these varietals stuck in the ground, and this is what you're going to get, We buy Marsanne and Roussanne for a few years and make it and try to sell it. It doesn't work so much, we just stop buying it. We start buying Sauvignon Blanc, and so it allows a flexibility of being able to do some different things and such. So, but like I said, making wine from different vineyard sites, that keep you on your toes too, because it's different, And again, that whole thing is just learning. Let's take the wines to the people up north and show them the other side of the tracks for Oregon wine production, and expand and evolve ourselves along the way, to
learn.
Yeah, and I don't have anybody to pass it on to. It's a shame as I get a little older now. I see that. A lot more respect for my granddad and my dad, the older generations, and growing up on a farm and a ranch where, and just conceptually, we learn all this stuff, we gain all this experience, whether you're a musician or you're whatever, and you're all of this collected, and then, ultimately we end up dying, and it's all, you build to this pinnacle of what you've been able to do, and then it's all gone, it's all over, other than what you can pass on to future generations and stuff. And our kids are off doing something else. Our son's an engineer, and daughter's kind of our gypsy child, kind of a wildflower. She's smart, she's brilliant, but I don't know.
Making jewelry.
Yeah, she's with her boyfriend's family out in Wisconsin, but I kind of wonder if we couldn't get something more stable or something, if Stacy wouldn't want to come back and kind of, there's still time for her to learn, the winemaking and stuff like that. She definitely likes the wines, and she'd be a good wine salesperson out there, but I don't know if that's the direct future of where Seasoned Cellars is going to be. It's a little bit of just like 1 month, 1 year at a time, and our ideas kind of change, as to what you, where you're, where you want to go.
Pressuring our kids.
No, certainly in no way.
So,
matter of fact, we'd be advising them against getting into the wine industry. You should do something else and make a better.
Don't get hooked.
Get a little bit more money in the bank, for your retirement, and then, whatever. If you can't go get filthy rich out there somewhere, then come back to
write-off.
Right. Then come back to the wine industry, because there's that saying in the wine business that if you want to make a small fortune, you got to start with a large one, and we didn't have that. We started with less than a small fortune, so. Yeah, it's a struggle out there. It's very competitive, and it's dominated by big players with a lot of money, deep pockets, whether the producers or the houses that they're in that drive wine sales in stores and restaurants around the state and the country. It's it's a tough one. But if you can, if your wines, are really, diamond quality, you can be a diamond in the rough. You still think you got something here. And people do come, they'll try the transparency, and others are like, never had a wine like this ever in my life, this white blend. And so there's something we can still capture out there, I think, by producing extremely unique and high quality wines.
Well, fantastic. Thank you both so much for sharing your stories with us and telling us about all the things behind Seasoned Cellars. And we'll go ahead and let you off the hook.
Well, thank you for having us today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's always kind of fun to share the story,
Absolutely.
So.